Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. On today's episode, I will be finishing up a spring carp campaign that I started a few weeks ago. When I say campaign fishing, I don't mean an entire season. I normally treat my carp fishing campaign like how a bass fishing tournament would be treated. For the early spring when the water is still cold, I like a panko pack bait mix. I will make it out of panko breadcrumb, cream of corn, and canned corn. The reason I prefer a panko breadcrumb mix instead of an oatmeal mix in the early part of the spring season is because the water is still cold. When the water is cold, carp will feed a lot less compared to later in the season like early summer or middle of summer campaign or even the fall. In the early season, if I were to feed with oatmeal, these carp will often get full really quick and I won't get as many bites. Whereas with the panko mix, I find that the carp will feed a lot much more heavily on the lighter mixture than a heavy mixture. So therefore, my preference is to use panko when the water is still cold, like the early part of spring like we are in now. I will give this bait a mix until it has a very cake-like consistency and I can pack it nicely around the lead. Now as for how much bait I am packing on to my bolt rig, I am packing on a very small amount of bait. The water is still cold, so a small amount is all I will need. I will fish this on a 9-foot spinning rod setup, typically used for steelhead. I like mono, but a lot of guys will opt for braid. I personally like to fish with mono when targeting carp because mono is extremely abrasive resistant. Unlike braid, which is not really abrasive resistant, I find that if mono were to get kinked up, I won't worry much about losing a fish, whereas with braid, I will lose fish, especially if the bottom have a lot of freshly submerged shrubs. I am wearing some fishing waders today because the lake is rising and it had stabilized in the last few weeks. And what this has done is it has submerged quite a bit of shrubs. So therefore, if a fish were to get snagged up on the shrubs in front of me, I'll be able to free the fish. Some anglers may not care and just say it is just a carp, but me personally, I treat all my fishes with respect. So therefore, I will do what I can to try and free the fishes if they do happen to get snagged up. Hence why I am wearing waders today. Now as for the area I am targeting, in the last 2 weeks I've targeted 2 separate areas, and this area I found out had the most amount of feeding fishes, and the school here was the most cooperative. Unlike Europe, where a lot of anglers will fish an entire season on a certain particular body of water, here in the United States that is not necessary, especially out here on the west coast, where carp will be the biggest biomass of any fish species present in many of our freshwater lakes in the lowlands. Therefore, I prefer to target a few areas, then finally decide on a particular area to target for the entire day. This area I chose to target today is a vein that is running through a giant shallow mud flat. When the lake finally stabilizes and is no longer rising dramatically or dropping dramatically, carp and catfish love mud, especially fresh mud that is formed after 1 or 2 weeks of stable weather and rising water conditions. This is the best kind of conditions I have found to be conducive for targeting early spring carp in Northern California in our lowland reservoirs in the valley. Now this bite on the right hand rod is a classic example of a turtle that have gotten to the bait. When I ended up pulling the rod out to rebait, the rod on the left hand side went off, and I knew that this, in fact, was a carp. As I've demonstrated this rig before, plenty of times in previous videos and episodes here on this channel when targeting carp, I prefer to fish with a hair rig, thus preventing me from hooking that turtle earlier that took the bait on the right hand rod. This also allows me to just lose the bait and not hook up on turtles. However, when a carp does take the bait, this will let the carp panic and run off with a bolt rig. Here in the United States, a bolt rig is perfectly acceptable to fish for carp, whereas in the UK or many parts of Europe, in those little fancy lakes they treat them like pay lakes, whereas the bolt rig can be banned in many of those kind of lakes. But here in the United States, it is not necessary, and the bolt rig is what I will fish with about 90% of the time. Now this is a very small male carp. How do I know this fish is a male? Because the male's carp will always be the first few fishes to move up onto the shallow mud flat. He is very pretty nonetheless. Alright buddy, rest up a bit and I'll let you go. The beauty of early spring carp fishing is I don't need to bring a brolly, and I could just sit here and watch the beautiful greenside hills and the scenery, and no loud drunk water recreational folks. Now, this rod on the left hand side got a very light bite. This bite is what I would call a drop back bite. This will require me to pick up and set the hook because the carp is swimming towards me. Again, as I've mentioned before in the past on many of my carp fishing episodes, I like to fish with bite alarms and a bite indicator. What the bite indicator allows me to do is detect if the fish have picked up the bait and is swimming towards me. The bolting effect will not happen when a fish swims towards me because the bolt is built for the carp to swim forward when it panics with the bait. Now this is another small male carp. Some people may ask me, how do I know that this is a male or female carp? Well, in the early spring, the males will develop these small tubercles around their gill plates, and this will feel rather grainy or sand-like. So therefore, I know that this is a male getting ready to spawn, probably in the later part of spring. It is still a very small pretty carp nonetheless. Thanks for playing, buddy. Off you go. Now as for this bite that's about to occur, I just got done rebaiting the rod on the left hand side that I got that last fish on, and while I was putting on the bite indicator, the rod on the right hand side decided to go off. This is a classic bolting effect of the bolt rig as demonstrated by the bite alarm and the bite indicator. All I did was end up picking up the rod, and now I have another fish on. In the past, I haven't demonstrated an early season carp fishing campaign because the last 2 years we've been having some extremely severe early spring weather. With that early spring weather we've had in the past, many of these lakes were rising extremely rapidly and we didn't have much stable weather pattern. However, this year we've had some incredibly stable early spring pattern. Therefore, I'm able to conduct this campaign this year in 2025. This is another small male carp, very pretty nonetheless. Hopefully some females show up today and I'll be able to show you guys some bigger fishes, why I decided to target this area. Thanks for playing, buddy. Off you go. Most of the fishes that were biting today were coming off the left hand rod. The reason I believe this was happening was because most of these fishes were feeding on the outside of this bay. I ended up picking up the rod to set the hook because this carp decided to swim parallel very close to the bank. If I didn't set the hook, this fish probably would have spat out the bolt rig and I never would have gotten him. Now, as for some of my European viewers whom have watched me fish for carp here in the past, well, I will say a few things about American carp fishing. For the most part in America, carp are often the biggest biomass of fishes in many of our freshwater lakes. There are only a very small handful of guys who like to fish for carp, and more times than not, an angler who like to fish for carp will have the entire lake to themselves. There are no other anglers who like to fish for carp, and if you do happen to meet someone who like to fish for carp, they're the anomaly, not the norm. This is another very long, lean male carp. These male carp are a whole lot leaner than their female counterpart. Thanks for playing, buddy. Off you go. As the day progresses, this is the bite I wanted to show my viewers and subscribers. This female carp ended up taking the rod on the left so violently that the bite indicator ended up getting stuck in the rod guide. Now, as for how do I know this is a female carp? Well, in this particular reservoir, the female carp will run a whole lot larger than their male counterpart. In the last fishing pre-trip session I had here before I decided on this area, I caught a handful of female fishes that had moved up into the shallow early. So therefore I anticipated today that there was going to be a handful of female carp in this area. The other area I ended up pre-fishing didn't have any female carps available. Hence why I call this a campaign. I know a lot of die-hard carp anglers will say a campaign is an entire season. However, an entire season on these western reservoir I find will be a waste of time because I can quickly pick apart an area and figure out whether or not all the carp in that area is uniform of the same size. However, my preference is to target multiple areas before settling down on a specific area with a specific group of fishes that I will prefer to target. This is a gorgeous female carp I end up getting in the net. Now this is the size that I wanted to target and the school that I was looking for. This is a much smaller female carp, but quite the scrappy fighter nonetheless. She is very gorgeous, full fin, and not a scale out of place. A bit on the skinnier side, but I'll take what I can get for the first female. Thanks for playing, buddy. I'll let you rest up a bit, and off you go. So the rod on the right hand side that was in the heart of the bay was getting picked apart by turtles again. So the rod on the left hand side ended up getting bit, and I knew that I was on to another very nice female carp. This fish fought really well and really hard. I knew that this was a pretty decent sized fish. I love how these fishes fight so hard in the early part of spring. They're trying to put on weight, so they are full of fight despite the water being cold. A lot of folks may hate carp fishing or carp in general, but I find carp fishing to be extremely tranquil and relaxing. It helps me a lot just by clearing my mind and just watching time goes by along with the green scenery and enjoying nature fully for what it is. It's a much slower style and approach to fishing, but in today's world where everything is fast paced and time flies by without waiting for anyone, carp fishing allows me to enjoy nature at its fullest, just to watch the day go by and the tranquil surrounding. I can safely say it is where I find my inner peace. Now this is a much larger female carp, probably in the teens, but not a trophy nonetheless. However, I am very proud just to catch a fish of this size early in the spring. I know a lot of anglers will say they've caught bigger fishes, but I am not a trophy angler. I am more so just happy that I accomplished my goal of targeting this set group of fishes that I set out to target for this campaign. So therefore, if I land this fish, I'll be able to show my subscribers and viewers the kind of fishes that I wanted to target out of this particular area. I finally got her in the net, and this is a gorgeous fish. She is full body and not a scale out of place. This is the kind of fish that I wanted to target from this particular area. This is a very gorgeous fish. I'll show her to you guys real quick, and I will prep her for release. She is full body and not a scale out of place. I'll let her rest up a bit, and then when she's able to swim, I'll let her go. Thanks for playing, buddy. Off you go. While I was changing out the battery for the secondary camera, the rod on the right hand side ended up getting bit, so I only have the GoPro footage. I ended up hooking into another nice female carp, and I knew that the female carp were in this area finally. It took a while, and after weeding through a lot of the much smaller male carp, I finally accomplished my goal for the day of this campaign. I specifically wanted this campaign to end up targeting most of the female fishes that were moving up onto these shallow mud flat to feed early. I know that for carp fishing, a lot of the male fishes will always move up first. However, there will always be a small numbers of female fishes that are following the male fishes. So today was quite a successful campaign I had at this lake. It's early in the season, so hopefully if the weather stabilizes, I could get a few more campaign out at many other lakes around my area. This reservoir just so happened to be the first reservoir in my area to stabilize. Hopefully in the next few weeks, before these fishes start spawning, I will be able to put out a few more episodes in a few more lakes where I'm able to complete a few more campaigns. But today was just quite a successful campaign, so hopefully if there are some anglers still doubting whether or not spring is here in Northern California, if you're not somewhere up in the high Sierras or something, spring is truly here. There are some basses in the shallow, and there are warm water species starting to gradually move up and start feeding. While trying to get footage for you guys with the carp in the net already, the other rod went off. So now I have 2 female carp. If I land this fish successfully, I know that I will have another great fish to show you guys. I couldn't believe this occurred again. The last time I had something like this happen was when I was finishing up the river carp campaign last summer. Overall, today was quite the success. I didn't anticipate this many fishes were going to cooperate for the camera. The last pre-fishing trip I had before deciding to fish this area completely, I only caught about 4 fishes, but all 4 were female fishes. I didn't anticipate there were going to be some males in the shallow in this area, but today I did manage to catch a handful of males at the beginning, so therefore today was quite the success. This second fish fought really hard, I think because she knew that there was another fish in the net already, but ultimately I ended up landing her too, so now I got 2 female carp in the net. I'll put them on the landing mat so I could show them to you guys. She is a gorgeous fish nonetheless. This is why I use the boat rig. Hopefully a lot of anglers see the corn and the hook hanging from the corner of the jaw. This allows me to hook the carp on the bottom of the jaw every time. And with these carp hook that I'm using, I'm able to just get the hook out right away. These are gorgeous fishes, not a scale out of place, and I'll show them to you guys. This is another gorgeous small female carp. She fought very hard nonetheless. She's a bit on the leaner side, probably because she just got up from her winter haunt, but she will gain the weight later on the weeks. Now this second fish was also about uniformly the same size. This is the reason why I do the pre-fishing before filming these sessions. Without the pre-fishing, I can never anticipate the group of fishes that I will be targeting. This helps me a lot in deciding the group I want to target. Thanks for playing. Rest up a bit and I'll let you go. Now as for you too, buddy, rest up a bit as well, and as soon as you're ready, off you go as well. Overall, today was quite a successful completion to my early spring campaign at this reservoir. I ended up catching the targeted fish out of this group that I wanted to target, so therefore it was quite the successful completion to my early spring carp campaign. Thank you guys for watching, and until next time, tight lines y'all.